as opposed to Florida weather where it's hot in January.
So Alex, that's where I'm going to take 5 days, going down to Jacksonville to get some TPC golf in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Are you playing the main course or the die course?
Whatever they can get us on.
Nice.
Yeah. Did you get to watch any of it last weekend?
I did. I got a friend that works in the legal side over there that I went to grad school with.
Oh, wow.
She works on the legal team over there. So I always catch it. My wife waited tables there when she was in law school. So I got a couple connections at TPC.
Okay. Well, maybe
beautiful course.
I wouldn't be mad if you get the friends and family discount. So let me know. I'll be disconnected from the county and any government entity. I can go back to being a normal negotiator, huh?
You got to clear that with Mark Griffin. Sorry.
Yeah.
I will be gone for the county, so it'll be the tether will be severed. Go back to being a normal human being for 7 days. Okay, well, Cardi, are we recording now?
Yes.
Okay. Let's give it another minute for Director Lockett, but I think we've got a quorum.
Director Lockett's on the call.
Okay. Hey, good morning, Lenore. Do you have camera availability this morning or no?
Yes, we see her and she's on mute, I believe.
Okay, I don't see it. Let me switch my okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Is the county executive on?
Yes, I've been here. Sorry, I've been here since the beginning. Just me and Carly.
Good morning. Okay.
Yes, the county exec is on the call as well.
For some reason, let me see if I can. Okay, I don't see him. But good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 18th Cuyahoga County Equity Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ted Carter, the Economic Development Chief for the county and a co-chair. Let me welcome everybody and then do a quick roll call. Director Lockett.
Here.
Director Drucker. Director Drucker.
I'm here.
Director Merriman.
I'm here.
And Director Pelham.
I'm here.
Okay, so we've got a full complement this morning. So thank you all for being here. Ms. Morales, were the minutes sent out to everyone for review? Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our February meeting?
Yes, they were sent out.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Okay. So okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Good deal. Thank you, everyone. Let me turn it over to the county exec for a welcome and any comments he'd like to make.
Hello, everybody. I appreciate again all the work that you're all doing. I guess my biggest comment is that we will be missing Ted shortly. Sorry to see that Ted is abandoning us, but we need to, has there been any discussion about who will take the lead on getting these meetings organized? I know we still have two co-chairs left, but we need to make sure that this continues.
Yes, sir. We have, and we'll present that at the next meeting. Ms. Morales will still be here, as you recall, and for members of the public, the Cleveland Foundation graciously funded her for 2 years to support our countywide equity efforts, as well as supporting the equity work in the Office of Development. She'll be working in concert with both co-chairs going forward, but yes, there'll be leadership. Mr. Hurdick will be taking my place representing Department of Development, which is reflected in the equity ordinance.
Great.
But we'll have a smooth transition and continuity.
I might also just add that I will be meeting today with members of the CEA and the building trades who have asked for the meeting. They have some questions about the equity department ordinance, and in particular are questioning some of the statistics, some of the numbers in the disparity study, which of course is the basis for a lot of what we're trying to do now. So we will see how that transpires this afternoon.
Yes, sir. We'll be anxious to hear the outcome of that meeting. I think that will be timely.
I think Lenora is talking to Griffin and Strong about the basis for the numbers to confirm whether or not there are omissions. Is that right, Lenora?
Yes, we've gathered some data. We've alerted Griffin and Strong that we're waiting to hear the specifics of what's missing. And I've been gathering data on the initial determined assertion that it was one of the projects. So we're looking at that data. And once we have a full summary, we will make sure and confirm with Griffin and Strong that that was included or why it was not included in
Great.
the study. And if so, how it impacts the item.
Thank you.
Any other reflections, County Exec?
I think turn it back to you.
Okay, sir. Just a couple of quick comments, and then we'll do our round table as we typically do, having each of the directors make any comments. As the county executive mentioned, this will be my last meeting attending as a commissioner of the Equity Commission. My last day with the county will be March 31st. I'll be going to Baltimore to serve as deputy mayor for economic development. But really, as I think about the last 6 months of our work together, we've covered a lot of ground and made a lot of progress. Some of the substantive things that this commission, working with our countywide equity working group, have been this week. We set a target of releasing the countywide training RFP. That went out. Our deadline was March 31st. So we beat it by 2 weeks, which is terrific. We turned in our report on time, and just some terrific commitments made by each of the 5 pilot agencies. I was on the call this morning with OMJ. They have a monthly equity subgroup that they formed that's chaired by Sheila Wright. They're making great progress, are anxious to participate and sync with the equity training once that's awarded. And so they're looking at both training for their employees as well as their providers, which is terrific. The creation of the equity fund led by the county executive, which has given a baseline of funding to advance the work. And then the work that has gone on at each of the pilot agencies has been significant. And in my own department, Ms. Morales has really done a terrific job of creating dialogue around the issue of equity and inclusion. And I know that has also occurred at HHS and each of our other pilot agencies. So already, County Exec, your leadership and support of this work has created a different county culture. You can see and feel it. We've got more work to do as we export the foundation and the framework to the other agencies across the county, which is outlined in the report. So just feel like a great foundation has been set, and I'll be looking forward to watching the momentum and success of these efforts from Baltimore. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to co-lead with my partners. It's been some of the most meaningful work I've done here at the county, and frankly, in my career, so grateful for the opportunity. Let me just say, for members of the public, just to report again, we want to make sure that people are having the opportunity to read the county's internal equity report, which complements the external advisory council. Again, the website for that is cuyahogacounty.us/equity fight racism. Any of the other commissioners have any comments, thoughts, reflections?
Ted, I got a couple things, if possible. One, I wanted to express, that I will miss you, and I think a lot of people here at the county will miss you. We were acquaintances in Jacksonville, and what I consider friends now that you're leaving Cuyahoga County, having worked with you twice. You will be missed, and your work will be missed. Over the last couple of days, there have been a couple of things that have happened that really reminded me of why this work that we're doing is so important. The horrendous scene that you saw down in Atlanta with 8 people murdered is horrific. There's no other way around it. It's horrific, and it's terrible. But something a little closer to home. Over the last 6-8 months, we've made it a point to open dialogue in our department, just to talk about subjects. We had people sit through the Akron University class willingly on off time, one that was offered at night, and it really started to create this dialogue between some of the people in our department. And yesterday something happened, and I questioned whether I was even going to talk about it, but it bothered me enough that I thought we should. And why this work's so important is that we had an employee who's an amazing employee, African-American female, and we were talking about appearance, and we were talking about certain things that happen in our department. And she had mentioned to me that she was concerned if she wore her hair natural, that it would be viewed as unprofessional. And that bothered me still. I mean, I'm very rarely speechless or visibly bothered, but that bothered me. This is a great employee, a great person, somebody that does everything. And it just further shows how far we have to go and how important this work is, because that's not what we should be worrying about. There's enough things in this world to worry about. It bothered me, and I wanted to bring it up because it's a great point of how far we have to go and how much this work actually means in the real world, in real life, to real people. And it's not just a piece of paper. It's not just a slideshow. It's life.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, but it still bothers me, and it has for a while. So I just wanted to highlight that.
No, thank you for sharing your comments. Alex, been a great partner, but I'm glad you mentioned both the situation in Georgia as well as that example. Just quickly, our work here as a commission, we declared early on that because of the conditions and the demographics here in the county and the history here, that we would focus initially on racial equity as related to African Americans. But this committee has a broader mandate. And as we wrote in our report, we said that this would be a starting point for other dimensions of equity. We would create a framework where other dimensions of equity could be addressed. And so there's a lot of other ethnic groups that do have challenges, both in the county and nationally. And so please keep that in mind as you go forward. And also that example, thank you for the courage to share that example, because that's really what we're trying to do, both through the training and through the leadership of this group, is create safe spaces for those conversations to occur with you and then in the broader community, so people can understand the different perspectives that emerge in our daily work.
Ted, I have a few announcements. No, I'm sorry, go on, Jesse. You go first.
Well, I was going to just continue what Alex was talking about, and I was involved in a circumstance earlier this week that reminded me that people really aren't cognizant of the effect of some of the symbols that we see. I was involved in a discussion where there was a racial stereotype was displayed, a very popular racial stereotype in Northeast Ohio, and I was surprised by the reaction of a number of people that did not consider it to be a racial stereotype. So I think we've got a lot of work going forward to change people's perceptions as to how things affect people who are not necessarily within their own social group, or who are not necessarily associated with them on a daily basis. And I think it gave that message to me loud and clear. I also want to take an opportunity, and I know we've done it before, but to thank Catherine and her group for the RFP. I mean, it is absolutely top notch. I'm hoping that it will garner us top quality vendors. And I know that Catherine and I have had some discussions about segueing the training over to my group, and we are very prepared and very ready and looking forward to executing on that. And Ted, I'd like to thank you for all of your efforts. I think you've added a dimension to this that has been very, very powerful, and you should be very proud of the work that you've done so far, and the work that's moving forward because of the impetus that you've given it.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ted.
So I'd like to also share along the same lines as Alex and Jesse. And first, I do have to acknowledge I have IT in my office, so I'm wearing my mask. So excuse me if I don't come through as clear. But first I want to congratulate Ted. I think you've accomplished a lot of really wonderful things. You've made a significant difference to our community. Your public service is acknowledged and appreciated. Personally, you've also been a great colleague, and I've learned from you. So I look forward to hearing you continue to grow and also provide a lot of benefit to our country and other states and cities that matter. We're learning from each other on a daily basis. So I think we'll continue to do that. Few updates from the Department of Health and Human Services. First is very exciting. The Office of Early Childhood released an RFP recently to bring in their providers for universal pre-kindergarten. And some part of this is routine. We do RFPs every couple years. They release this in advance of the executive orders, but committed to beginning to document the diversity of their staff, the organizational commitments of their partner organizations in their proposal process. And they reflected on the need to fight racism and support equality in their organization's mission statement. And I share this to say this is one of the most successful and popular programs that the county has to offer. And they under Rebecca Dorman's leadership have gotten out ahead of DHHS to make sure, despite not having the apparatus in place for us to have specific goals and outcomes yet, we want to start to hear what our partner organizations think they can do. Okay, to support our effort to increase inclusion, to address disparity, and to improve the lives of our underserved populations. And so that's the first thing, and I'm really excited to see them complete their scoring, come back with recommendations. Second thing I just would say is we recently completed the hiring process for the assistant director position. I'm not at liberty yet to say who is the candidate that we put forward. We'll be making that announcement shortly. But I do want to say this, this process, like many others, it's a hard process. We have to make difficult decisions. We have a lot of quality candidates internally and externally. What two things that made this difference is we committed in this process that individual 51% of their time at least will be focused on addressing race, equity, and inclusion across the Department of Health and Human Services. At all time, the majority of their work will be to advance this work. And this is not to say that I won't be as involved as I have been. I expect to be more involved. And at the same time, we know that this has to be something we commit to. And to ensure that, I asked Lenora Lockett, who was very generous with her time, to be the final stage of interviewer, because we felt like, as Lenora does her current work with the Office of Procurement and Diversity and some of the work that's planned for the future, we need to start looking at leadership as a shared resource. And we need to understand that when we bring in candidates, we're adding to the team. They may report to me, and they may be a DHHS employee, but they are a part of our team, and we all will work together to advance this work. I said 2 points, but I did have a final one. This, just as Ted leaves, we also lose a significant leader within the Department of Health and Human Services. Crystal Bryant, the director of our Office of Reentry, is leaving DHHS to be the executive director of the Cleveland NAACP. And I share this to say that's a great promotion and a great leadership opportunity for Crystal. It is well earned. She has earned the opportunity to go on to become a leader of a marquee organization. It's also a sign of how the county and its leadership is viewed in the community. I do think there are times that we are cast under some pretty negative perceptions, but I do think the community recognizes we have quality leaders that are in demand, and whether they're in demand locally at one of the greatest organizations our community has to fight racism, or nationally in a city like Baltimore, a peer leading city, I think we have to recognize that we do in fact have quality candidates. We have quality leaders, and we're all committed to doing this work. But unfortunately, at times others are also competitive and they take away our talent, but I know there are people behind them to backfill them. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Merriman. Director Lockett.
Yes, I want to echo some of the sentiments. Thank you, Ted, for your leadership, especially over the past 6 months of getting this equity report up, moving, and the process continuing to grow and keeping the momentum. I also want to thank you for your support with me with the disparity study and the recommendation and the completing our portion of the equity report and offering to be a mentor and guide for any future questions I might have. So we'll miss you. I'm happy that you have the opportunity to go back home where your family is located, but I appreciate the time that you had here and know that we'll have to find a way to continue on, and you're going to leave us with some tips on that. I also appreciate the different comments made by the leadership on this team, because it further emphasizes that while we're an internal equity commission, there's a personal passion with everyone, recognizing that it was definitely great and needed to have Armin's leadership, but also that his leadership is supporting people to bring forth the passion that they know that is needed to promote racial equity and inclusion in the county. So,
yeah, thank you very much, Director Lockett, for your, thank everyone for your kind words. Gonna kind of move the agenda along here with everyone's permission. We'll end with some other quick updates, but wanted to welcome Dr. Peter Hubman, who is the professor at Case University at the Center for Community Health Integration, School of Medicine. His bio is quite lengthy and I wouldn't do it justice, but just so pleased that he could join us. And he's been working with the External Advisory Committee to really bring Case systems approach to an evaluation of our ecosystem, how it's structured and how it interrelates. And so wanted to provide him the opportunity this morning to give us an overview of his work with Case, his early findings, but really get the 5 of us and the 4 of you now thinking about the intersectionality between our internal systems that we have jurisdiction over and how it interfaces with the external systems that we impact through our services. So Dr. Hubman, welcome to the Cuyahoga County's Internal Equity Commission. And I think you've got about 20 minutes to go through your presentation. I know it'll generate a lot of questions. So good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to present and share some of the work. Can folks hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Terrific. And can you see the slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
And I know going back from Case's report that you have a lot of detail in some of your presentation. Are you comfortable sending this out to the commission afterward? Absolutely.
So
okay,
feel free to share and use the PowerPoint slides as you see fit.
Thank you.
So what I'll present today in terms of is a brief overview of the approach, and go and talk briefly about what the process looks like, share a systems map, and take you through one example of just some of the conventions, looking at some of the early discussions around bond reform. This also appeared in the report at the end of January from the Citizens Advisory Committee. So there's that as a resource, and then also be open to questions at any point. So the work here, there's the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity, and then before that, we also have in parallel a project, Cross-Sector Innovations initiative that's sponsored by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So these are two efforts that are both looking at structural racism. The Cross-Sector Innovations Initiative is looking at structural racism as a public health crisis, and that's led by Heidi Gullert and Greg Brown from Policy Bridge, along with this team. And then, so the approach we're taking in both of these draws on system dynamics, which is an approach to thinking about systems. The iceberg metaphor is useful for thinking about this. So in this metaphor, we're thinking about the events are things we see on the surface. So this is what we're often encountering, but below the surface are patterns over time. And that's often where we're collecting data and trying to understand what's happening, systems. And the patterns are created by structures, causal structures. And those structures come from values, attitudes, norms, metaphors, broadly mental models. So earlier when you were talking about having a long way to go, a lot of times when we're talking about issues around structural racism, gender-based violence, inclusion, it's the values that are producing this, which the direction here goes from the values create the systems we live in, which produce the patterns under time, and that eventually leads to the events that we see on the surface, and that's what we're often reacting to. And those events, they also reinforce and shape the structures, the norms, and so forth. So this is going in both directions. This is useful because what we're thinking about when we're trying to understand structural racism through systems thinking is really trying to understand what's happening. What is that structure that's producing the patterns of behavior that leads to the events that we react to? There are a number of ways we can do that. The specific approach we're taking is called system dynamics. I'm not expecting folks to parse this diagram, but it's really a way to understand how systems are structured. This is some work looking at maternal and neonatal health outcomes from Honduras. And we can use informal maps. This is an example of an informal map that policymakers were using. And they can also be converted into computer simulation models. And the advantage of that is now you can start to see, at least conceptually, how certain changes in a system might impact outcomes. So in this work here, this is a summary of results of reductions in maternal mortality ratio and neonatal mortality rate with a range of different strategies that were tested in the simulation model. And that was used to focus in on a particular set of solutions. So that's the picture of what we're working towards with in some of this work. Folks often ask me, is this new or has this been done elsewhere? We're taking a participatory approach called group model building. And this is just a range of, this just showing you a map of the many places around the world where this type of work is being done and a range of issues. And actually, there's a pretty active community here in Cleveland applying this approach on a variety of systems, both on a number of different issues, and I'm happy to share that. The timeline of this work really, in terms of started in the fall, we have the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity has been doing a series of interviews within the county and different organizations. And then I've been working from those interviews. There's also the group model building work from the Cross-Sector Innovations Initiative. There have been a number of reports over the years. So one of the, this actually goes back to 2005, the report on regionalism that was commissioned by the President's Council. and conducted by the Kirwan Institute. And then Place Matters report later on that talked about the impact of redlining and so on. The diversity report, so forth. So that's being looked at and included. And then also most of the meetings being online also means the transcripts are available. So that information is being pulled in. We have the systems map, which I'll give you a high level overview of what's included. There are also, within the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity, there are subcommittees, and each subcommittee, there are a set of smaller maps. I'll show you one example that is on bond reform. But no, these cover a range of issues, including human resources, training, housing, so forth. This spring, we'll be working on starting to map in solutions and identifying potential leverage points, along with starting to come up with a set of prioritized leverage points. And then by June, we should have a working simulation model along with some initial metrics and logic model that could be used for program and policy evaluation. And when I say simulation model, these can be tools which can actually be interactive. They work on a any smartphone, iPad, computer screen, so you can think through scenarios. They're not meant to be tools that are a substitute for judgment or making predictions. They're meant to support and help people understand systems, and they can talk more about that if folks are interested. So the systems map, and again, I'm not going to go through all the details. I just want to give you a high level overview. This is the current working draft. We're starting to revise this again. There are several major sectors. There's the criminal justice. There's equitable quality of life, which includes housing, transgenerational stability, wealth equity. We have health and healthcare. So this includes physical health, health workforce, environmental health. There's economic opportunity, which also includes education at all stages across the lifespan. And education here is going to be broken out as a separate system just because of, in particular, in the work moving forward. And then an interesting feature of this map is it also includes perspective transformation. So over the years, many of the maps I've developed with different groups, they might have a description of what the system is and how it's functioning, but they actually don't include the structures to actually change the system itself in terms of thinking. So here we have diversity and leadership, for example, influence of values. There's a structure over here around trustworthiness and trust and how hope develops, impact on policies.
Dr. Hubman, excuse me, may I ask a question? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go
Just
ahead.
On the development of both the map and the different dimensions of this, was this co-created with the case group, or did you provide a template and they built it out, or could you just go through the process of the evolution of this?
Sure.
Please?
That's a great question. So, so this is co-created. It starts with. So initially, some of the work was with the Cross-Sector Innovations Initiative, and that was created. We started literally with a blank slate. That work was then presented also to the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity, and then the interviews that the Advisory Council have been conducting. That's the I'll show you an example of a structure, but that's coming from the interviews from those discussions, which are then edited and changed as we have conversations over time.
And the perspective transformation, that was initiated by whom? That is your term or the committee's collective term?
That's a term that comes from the Cross-Sector Innovations Initiative, the Robert Wood Johnson Fund project. So that was this, but the term itself, I believe, has origins in the work that Hip Kyoga has been doing for a number of years around structural racism and trust, and a fairly significant investment in training people around diversity and inclusion. So that's the origin of the term as I understand it. So it actually reflects a fairly significant investment of the county that's now emerged and is surfacing up in the map. You could argue that this structure here is that historic investment over, I believe, at least since going back to 2015.
Okay, thank you.
So just to introduce you to some of the conventions, this is a very specific example looking at bond reform. This was in the update that was released early this year. So we have a variable here, ability to pay bond, and then the arrows here represent causal relationships. They could be things that we know that are happening, how things work, or they could be associations. The pluses and minus indicate what direction the change is. So minus signs indicate things move in the opposite direction. So if you're increasing the bond amount, then the ability to pay the bond decreases. So that's a minus sign. If you increase the income, then the ability to pay the bond increases. So that's a plus sign. So plus and minus here don't mean good or bad. They're just, minus means things move in the opposite direction, plus mean in the same direction. The bond amount is a function of the bond recommendation. And the bond recommendation is driven by job stability, employment, and arrest history. And the double lines here indicate that there's a delay between the event here of an arrest and the bond recommendation. So this is essentially the criminal history that's influencing the bond recommendation. The arrest, they influences makes employment harder. So criminal history is being a barrier to employment, and employment obviously influences income. It creates job stability as a function of the bond that influences the bond recommendation, and employment also has a direct effect on bond recommendation. The ability to pay bond also influences employment. So if people don't have the ability to pay the bond, then they're from the interviews, and then it's it's harder to keep a job. People miss work. And ability to pay bond also has a direct effect on family in terms of disruption. And the disruption in family has an effect on arrests. So now we have a set of feedback structures. So there's one feedback loop here, and the B here indicates that it's a balancing loop and has a provisional name of income. So balancing loop will counteract the direction of change. There's a second one here, ability to pay bond. This is a reinforcing loop with the R. So reinforcing loops can be either vicious or virtuous cycle. Same structure. Job stability is another reinforcing loop. Employment is another reinforcing loop. Criminal history is a reinforcing loops. So again, it could be a virtuous or vicious cycle, the same structure. And when we're talking about disproportionate outcomes, one of the challenges is often the same structure. It could be working in a virtuous way for one group and in a vicious cycle for another group. And so if you're trying to change the structure, one of the things is to think through how do we flip it so that it can work in a virtuous way and ideally increase equity for all. And then the last loop in this particular structure is tied to family disruption. That's another reinforcing loop. So what's happening in these systems, and this is just one small diagram from one interview or set of interviews actually around a bond reform, is that all of these feedback loops are interacting over time and have various strengths. One of the things that one benefit of this is it just allows us to start to visually see what is the system that's underlying some of these structures we're trying to change. But the other benefit is it allows us to begin to think about how to map in solutions. And I can share this as a resource as well. But you could think about different types of interventions have different strengths, and leverage points are places where small places in a system where small changes can have a big effect. And a lot of the interventions that we are thinking about when you're looking at even a relatively simple structure like this, there are many things we might be able to do. Some will nudge the system in small ways in the desired direction or in a short term. Others will actually have the potential to transform the system with higher leverage. So this is essentially just, it's a good resource if you're interested in reading more about it. But basically what we're trying to go for is a sense of how the different recommendations are stacking up individually and in combinations. And that's the target for having something ready to share in June. So I think I'm open to questions if folks have them. I know this is a lot of information.
Excellent. I think it really, I'm a big believer in systems thinking, and so some of the work we've done in the Department of Development around our workforce system takes this approach, not as sophisticated as you presented, but the theory of it. So we're starting to see change in that regard. I'm curious, what are the end results once this is fully built out that you anticipate, in terms of actual results around criminal justice, economic development, reduction in poverty, increase in income, things like that? How do you both project that out and then track the impact?
So the result. So one is that the one result will be a sense of how investments can be staged, short, medium, long term. So some of the things around bond reform, they can have a fairly immediate impact on families and people's lives in terms of for the better. Some other things will take a longer time to develop. Something that's in the middle, you mentioned workforce development. Some of the structures around going across the different units in the county, for example, is very interesting because there clearly are some units that are doing some excellent work and thinking about workforce development from a feedback perspective and a longer term investment. It's both interesting and unique. So one of the results from this can be, how do you highlight or showcase the systems thinking that's already in a system that other units within the county can learn from, but also other organizations, private organizations, companies, schools, and so forth. In terms of projecting out the outcomes, I think that we'll be able to show, at least conceptually, how trends might change, sort of worse before better situations, or understand why certain interventions might be harder to implement, and others that can be sources of drivers for future work in terms of freeing up capability and so forth. Earlier you're talking about childcare, for example. So there's a lot of potential to free up human resources with childcare through certain strategic investments. And again, that's something that has a pretty quick impact on people's lives day to day and ability to keep a job and so forth.
It's powerful stuff. Three things jump to mind as we think about, kind of this stimulus money that's coming downstream. How do you look at this and really think more creatively and strategically about how that money is deployed? So this helps identify leverage points in that regard. Don't know if you agree with that or not. And then the other thing that really appeals to me and jumps out is the interdependence, not only the agencies within the county, but also externally. And how do you kind of align those in a more integrative and effective fashion, which is a chore in and of itself.
Yes, I agree with both of those points there. That's exactly right.
I had a couple questions. I know we're probably short on the time we've allocated for this, and I, for one, would be open to maybe extending the timeline for the time for the meeting, or having this be an issue of discussion at a later time or standalone meeting itself. So I'm curious as I look at the systems, I'm largely focusing on that variable 4, power to add, change, evolve, or self-organized systems. As the Director of Health and Human Services, I see quite a few of my systems having a role in the example you provided, but not listed, understanding that listing is far from intending to be exhaustive. Specifically things like housing, mental health, substance abuse, developmental disabilities. I think those are all there. There are systems in place and agencies and policies that clearly would have a role in basically in helping or hurting a person's ability to make bond. How do you view this being applied in the community and applied in the work that we're now talking about? What's the intent? Is it to get to the higher understanding, to have a more detailed map with with more of those variables presented, or is there another design intent here?
So there's two parts to that. It's probably not one system map. Even that one that's a high level is got a lot of detail. So it's probably over time, I imagine we have different maps for different issues, and some with the advisory council starting to connect, for example, human resources to also thinking about economic opportunity education. So where are the intersections that are cutting across systems? And the direction that those maps are developed is really a participatory process. So that comes from different groups who are interested in answering a question in a particular way. So it's a public resource. That's how I would think about it. The other aspect of this is really making sure that there are opportunities in the broadest sense for the communities to be able to both acquire the skills and tools and use them to think about everything from potentially how one might think about local food systems. So some of the work that Darcy Freeman's doing, thinking about food insecurity as and investments that might happen with food insecurity as an economic development strategy or workforce. So there could be any number of directions that can take, and part of that second part is really making sure that the opportunities to engage at a community level. And when I say sort of engage from prior work, we've done this in schools with middle school students and all the way with older adults looking at neighborhood issues in community settings. So the community-based system dynamics really starts at that community level. The fact that we're now doing this with professionals and folks in government and leaders of foundation is a plus, but it was really meant to be much more community focused.
Okay.
Good morning. This is Leon Harris. Dr. Huffman, I had a question about, so would this be considered like a mixed methods approach? Because as I'm looking at the paradigm you shared, or the conceptual model, just thinking about different definitions that may vary amongst communities, right? And then also the type of data that you're collecting, whether it's quantitative, and how that might support one another, those data might support one another. And then secondly, the second part to my question is, this is a very complex paradigm. So if we're thinking about those in the community and how we plan to present this, is there a way that you plan to share it that may be a little more watered down so that they can really understand it and give some feedback as to how they feel this affects them as a community and also individually? Yeah.
So to the first question, yes, it's a mixed method. Absolutely. And the key in terms of the data or the information, the assumption here is first you need to have some idea of the structure and what the terms mean within that structure. This is why the participation, and in particular having input from different stakeholders, community members, people with lived experience. So that's structure is really, really critical on that. In terms of sharing this more widely, I think we're going to need to have a variety of tools. So some simpler examples that are easier to grasp and share. But I would say that diagram that I shared, either the high level one from the Citizens Advisory Council or the earlier one that I shared around maternal and neonatal health, that level of complexity in a community setting, when it's done well and it reflects the language of how people are just describing their own systems, that's not actually too much if it's reflective. The key is really participation. The phrase that comes to mind is someone once saying, our lives are complex already, and this is a tool that helps us sort of visualize that. And in a community setting, it can help people feel validated that what they're experiencing are these forces of these systems. It's not internal, it's external. It's the system that's operating. And I've seen that happen in many groups, whether we're working with cancer survivors or students looking at how to increase algebra skills in middle and high school. So the key part there for that second part is really having people where it's more of a peer-to-peer sharing.
Yeah, Dr. Hoffman, just a quick question, and we'll open it up for our final questions from anyone. To just build on Leon's question has this been presented and tested at the grassroots level? We understand we have community involvement because of the council, but right. Just, this is a sophisticated model and approach which is needed. But at the end user level, is that something that you've engaged in?
With the cross-sector, with the cross-sector innovations initiative, we have leaders from communities who are participating and also shaping the methods and how we're describing that. And I mentioned group model building. We had the fall, we had an initial round of group model building. And then we just started actually on Monday, a second round that has a broader membership of communities. That diagram hasn't been tested beyond the participants from communities sort of more broadly, but that's an obvious next step. We have planned to do that in later this spring through a series of workshops or sessions that'll be designed with the members of the group model building team that we currently have.
Terrific, because one of the things from my perspective anyway around equity that's very baseline is transparency, accessibility, and connectivity. So broad terms, just at the most basic form, because sometimes systems are not available and accessible to people that we're charged with serving. So okay, terrific job. I know we'll probably set something else up with you, spend time with you. Any other questions from any of the commissioners or participants? Or reflections on his presentation? Oh, I'll have one. So you've presented to us, we're charged with by the executive and county council of kind of organizing the internal work. You're supporting the advisory council. How can this group support your work and the work of that council from your standpoint?
I think having I'm certainly happy to be available to have more conversations. I think these models, they only work to the extent that the purpose is being defined by different stakeholders, groups, and communities. And so I'm a methodologist by training, so I can offer lots of options and take things in different directions, but I really depend on input and direction from different groups. So if you see opportunities for applying this or asking specific questions, those types of questions and feedback is invaluable to this type of work.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hoffman. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, as we wind down, just a couple of updates that I want to make sure we covered. One, as I think we mentioned earlier in the meeting, is that the training RFP has been issued, and I think we have a 3-week response time. So An evaluation committee has been identified, and they will begin their work in early April with the goal of having the RFP awarded by early fall. So that's a big milestone. And as Director Drucker said, really looking forward to seeing the quality of the responses we get. And I know that there's already been some expressions locally of different firms that are anxious to participate in the work. And so that will be a near-term deliverable in the next, maybe even before the next meeting. Some of the other commitments we made in the report that I just want to keep in front of the commission members. The diversity office is in the process of being built out and introduced to county council. That was a joint recommendation made by both CASE and our commission. And so that is another important pillar of sustaining the work across the county. And so very pleased with the progress of that. The commission, working with our county working group, will be developing metrics for this work more broadly to track the impact of the work. And then the kind of build out of the CASE recommendation, prioritizing those, working with the CASE chair and Clerk Byrd, and also developing a recommendations for the biannual budget process, which will start late summer. So nice grouping of work and deliverables in the months ahead. So any other final comments by commission members?
Just one.
If I could. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Just acknowledging that, as I said in my prior announcements, there was a with the transition of Crystal Bryant from the Office of Reentry, we will be posting that position. I understand there are some very qualified internal candidates, but we're also committed to reviewing applications from the public. And this is one of the organizations in the Department of Health and Human Services that has had the most advanced thinking, and I think the most commitment to addressing race, equity, and inclusion goals for our community. So that's an announcement for the public, and if folks continue to follow along on the county's website, when that job is posted, they'll have the opportunity to apply. Thanks.
One of the things that I think I'd be remiss in mentioning is, as we go through this COVID-19 response and the vaccination effort, as Ohio had vaccines flooding in, we were lucky enough through some of the leadership at the federal, state, and county level to get this mass vaccination clinic here in Cleveland at the Wolstein Center. It's going on right now. But one of the important pieces of that is making sure that we reach every community, through the executive support and a lot of people on this call's work. There's a 211 option if you have technology issues that you can call 211 United Way and get assistance signing up. There's also transportation options to where whether it's an RTA bus, whether it's senior transportation put out of David's group, whether it's a ride share, to where transportation or any type of income is not a barrier in getting people vaccinated, because I'm going to guess the system chart on vaccination or getting sick with COVID has about 150 different tentacles that affect every other piece of your life. So, I would just take this time to the public, the people on this call, the employees, whoever it's doing. If you need help, call 211 United Way, call David's shop at DSAS. There are a lot of different avenues, and through some of the work we've all done, transportation is not going to be an issue. Lack of technology is not going to be an issue, but we still have to get the word out to where people know how to get to the pieces to help them connect to the vaccine. So that was it, but I think I'd be remiss of not mentioning that before we got out.
That's timely. And isn't there vaccinations going on today, Director Pelham? And you want to just talk about
there
that?
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got the Wolstein Center they're ramping up. This is the first week. They're going 1,500 doses, 3,000 doses. Today, they're doing 4,500 doses, and tomorrow it'll be 6,000. And for the rest of the 7 weeks, it'll be 6,000 a day. The Board of Health is running about 1,500 a day, twice a week through theirs. And there are roughly 90 other locations throughout the county, whether it be hospital systems, Walgreens, CVS, Giant Eagle, there's a website for the county, and I think it's Cuyahoga County Vaccine. I can't think of the exact name at the moment. Or you can call 211. I'm going to keep hitting the 211 United Way and ask them what's closest to you. You give them your address and they can tell you the private partners, the hospitals, if there are appointments for Wolstein, and get you set up, or at least get you headed in the right direction to where you can get set up to get people on there. But, you know, we're going to be one of the first states that's 16 and up. I know Alaska did it. I think our population's a little different than Alaska. So I like to think we're leading the way a little bit in this and getting everybody in, getting everybody done. You know, Northeast Ohio can thrive.
As a participant, can I make a comment?
Sure, Ms. Roberts, good morning.
It's Sheba Marshall.
Oh, okay, got it. Oh, I thought, I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to say that coming off 77 into work this morning, the signage was amazing. I noticed every single sign directing traffic to the Wolstein Center for that COVID vaccination. The signing was clear, it was concise, it was all along 77, right off 14, directing participants where they could go, but it was so easy to follow. I was so impressed by that. So just to follow up with those comments, that I thought that was so very well done this morning. I was very impressed by that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Okay, good deal. Any other final comments?
Director Carter, or Chief Carter, this is Leon Harris. Just to follow up with what Director Pelham was saying, the website is gettheshot.coronavirus.ohio.gov. And I think if you go to that website, you have the ability to put in your zip code, and it will give you the place that's closest to you that have some eligibility or appointments available. So again, that's gettheshot.coronavirus.ohio.gov.
Okay, terrific. No, that's important and timely for people to have that awareness. Okay, everyone. Well, best of luck. Terrific team. It's been just an honor working with you all these past 6 months, and I know I'll see you in the days ahead. So God bless. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Oh, before I adjourn, Ms. Morales, just for the public, can you give us the date of the next meeting, please, in April?
Yes, they're scheduled every third Thursday of the month. So the next one will be scheduled for April 15th, Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, and there'll be no issue with taxes since they delayed the tax day, I think, by 2 months. So good deal. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone.